Hi everybody, this is the flipped lesson for week 3 of educational assessment, and this week we are going to be discussing achievement targets. I highly recommend that you do the reading prior to watching the flipped lesson because I'll be making references to the reading. So big picture, big takeaway from this week is that good assessment is based on clear expectations. So prior to entering the learning process, you need to clearly define what it is that you expect from students by the end of the learning process in order to adequately assess it. So you absolutely need to develop clear achievement targets in order to implement best assessment practices. Before we dive into that, one thing I did want to briefly discuss is standards. So the assessments are based on achievement targets. Achievement targets are based on standards. For those of you in K-12 settings right now, this will be a little bit of review, but for the hopefully will be helpful. For those of you who aren't in K-12, this may be new to you. So states are responsible for identifying what students should be able to know and do by the time that they graduate high school. So in Maine, we have a set of standards called the Maine Learning Results. And this is what our state has identified as what students should be able to know and do. So I'm going to pull up, this is the Maine Learning Results. You can access it through the Maine Department of Education website. And here's a list of the 8 different content areas for the Maine Learning Results. What's interesting is recently, the federal government has dictated what students should be able to know and do in ELA, English Language Arts, and in math. And they've done this through the Common Core standards. So this is a list of the Common Core standards. I have the literacy for 5th grade standards pulled up. These are specifically writing standards for 5th grade. So all states were required to adopt the Common Core standards for ELA and for math as the end results. So when I go to the Maine Learning Results page, the Maine Learning Results for ELA and for math are the Common Core state standards, and that's true for all states. For science, many states have adopted the Next Generation Science Standards. This is a link to the Next Gen Standards, but states aren't required to have adopted it. And some states, like Michigan, for example, make some adjustments to the Next Gen Science Standards before they adopt them. So that's just for your reference and for your awareness. Oops, wrong PowerPoint. So if you haven't explored any of the standards, please do. I should point out as well that some districts unpack and rewrite some of the standards for their own use. So when you get time, you can start to explore the standards. As you're thinking through your assessment, I would recommend picking 2 or 3 standards to kind of play with and to experiment with. So I mentioned that we must have clear expectations, and there's some risks and benefits to having clear expectations. The risks of not having clear expectations is that you and the students don't know where you're headed. The benefits is that you have a clear goal of where you're supposed to be. And so I'll be using an analogy to tennis throughout today's lesson. And the analogy for risks and benefits would be that if a tennis player, if a brand new person showed up, knew nothing about tennis and showed up on the tennis court, and wasn't totally sure what it was that they were supposed to do, they may start hitting the ball and just tip the ball over the net a couple of times. Or they may play for 75 or 100 points. And they may think that they're doing a good job. It's not until they understand the scoring of tennis and how different matches are played and what the goal is and how you score points that they would really understand what it is that they need to be doing with their time as they're learning tennis. The benefits is that you can break down the learning, the intended learning, into its different subcomponents. So within tennis, you need to learn how to score a match. You need to learn the strategy of the game, but you also need to learn the technique, and you need to learn footwork, and you need to learn how to serve. So you can break it down into those different subcomponents. When we break things down into the subcomponents, we can break achievement targets down into subcomponents, and you've read about this, but we can break it down into knowledge and understanding, reasoning, skills, products, and dispositions. And your assessment is going to be based on the different kinds of achievement targets. So for instance, knowledge and understanding in tennis might be knowledge of the scoring of the game. or knowledge of how different matches add up to a game. Okay, skills may be the ability to swing a forehand and to swing a backhand. Products may be winning a match, and the dispositions may be playing aggressively or playing persistently. Reasoning would be more about strategy within a tennis game, and being able to carefully play the opponent and knowing the opponent's strengths and weaknesses. So your goal is going to be to write learning objectives based on these different achievement targets, because ultimately when you write assessments, you will write based on these different achievement targets. When you write learning objectives, they need to be written as SMART objectives. If you haven't heard this acronym before, it stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So all objectives have to be specific in that you need to outline exactly what the intended learning is. They must be measurable in that you can quantify it in some way. One of my big pet peeves is that you cannot measure understanding. So a learning objective should never say students will understand that, because you can't get into the student's brain and actually measure what they understand or don't understand. You can measure what it is that they're producing. It needs to be attainable. So a learning objective written for a third grader shouldn't be asking a third grader to do calculus unless that third grade student is capable of doing calculus. Same with realistic, and they need to be timely. So you need to articulate when things should occur. So for instance, if we were writing a learning objective for tennis, and let's say we were writing an objective for a backhand swing, we would say something to the effect of, by the end of the month, players will be able to successfully hit a backhand shot with 90% accuracy. So it's timely in that I said by the end of the month. It was measurable in that I said 90% accuracy. It's attainable, not for some of us new tennis players, but perhaps for some more practice and seasoned tennis players. And it's specific in that I mentioned that it's specifically a backhand shot. One of the things that will help you with learning objectives is to use Bloom's taxonomy. So if you've never seen Bloom's taxonomy before, this is it. And so Bloom proposed that there are different levels of thinking skills or levels of knowing. At the bottom of this pyramid are lower order thinking skills, and at the top are higher order thinking skills, sometimes abbreviated to LOTS, lower order thinking, and HOTS, higher order thinking. So lower order thinking would be knowledge understanding. This generally is kind of basic recall of facts, basic observation, listing things, naming things. One step above that is kind of an understanding or a comprehension. So can you translate something into your own words? Can you summarize key ideas? Can you demonstrate your understanding of it? Can you talk about it in a knowledgeable way? The step above would be applying. So that's taking that knowledge and applying it in a different situation. Maybe you're applying it in a problem-solving situation. Maybe you're manipulating some kind of information or experimenting with or designing something new with it. Analyzing would be the next step up. Trying to find patterns, trying to find where things compare or contrast, or how things are organized in a sequential way. Synthesis is combining different kinds of information to create new ideas. So composing a new idea, inferring or modifying, and then finally the highest order thinking skill would be evaluating. And often evaluating based on evidence. So assessing theories or ideas, comparing ideas. And so the idea is that students should be moving from knowledge all the way up through evaluation. So they first need to establish some of those lower order thinking skills in order to then be able to accomplish the higher order thinking skills. If you do a quick Google search for Bloom's taxonomy, there's some really great charts like this one that I have that include verbs that correspond with the different level of thinking skills. These are so helpful when you're developing learning objectives, because if you know that you have a synthesis learning objective, it can sometimes be hard to kind of find what verb it is that you want to use. When you're writing learning objectives, you should be writing objectives that start at knowledge and comprehension and move up to synthesis and evaluation. If you're just focusing on synthesis and evaluation, you haven't established that knowledge and comprehension. Conversely, if you just focus on knowledge and comprehension, you're never asking students to engage in higher order thinking. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was something that we started talking about last week, and I mentioned that I would get back to you today on it because I couldn't find a great way to phrase it, and I've thought a lot about it, and now I actually have applied it to what we're doing today. So last week when we were talking about proficiency, we spoke a little bit about how teachers distinguish between a 3 and a 4 in levels of proficiency. So 3 would be proficient and 4 is exceeds proficiency. And I think John brought up the idea that oftentimes teachers are saying, well, if they're at a 4, they should be able to teach somebody else what they know. And that would classify as a 4. And I said, you got to be careful about that. And then I kind of had a hard time articulating what it was that I meant by it. So here's my attempt at re-articulating that. If you're going to use 4 as exceeds expectation, and the way students demonstrate that they exceed expectation is by teaching others, the ability to teach others would relate to either a skill or a product learning objective or achievement target. Okay, so if the achievement target or learning objective is written that tennis players will be able to score more points than opponents, then playing in a match and winning the match would be an appropriate exceeds expectation. Okay. On the other hand, if the achievement target is knowledge and understanding, sometimes reasoning, sometimes skill, then it isn't necessary. You can't necessarily assess it as teaching others in terms of exceeding expectations. So for instance, if the achievement target is that the tennis player will be able to hit a cross-court shot using their backhand with 90% accuracy, then a level 4 exceeding expectation would be that they hit it with 95 or 97% accuracy. Not that they use it in a match. So not that they win a match with backhand. So you have to match the achievement target with the assessment of the achievement target. Okay. So in other words, if your achievement target relates to being able to apply your understanding to different contexts, then it would be totally appropriate to have a level 4 be teach others because it's an application. If your achievement target, on the other hand, focuses on precision or accuracy, then a level 4 of teaching others doesn't match your achievement target of precision or of accuracy. So this is something I want to follow up on. So what I'm going to ask you to do is a short posting. At the end of this agenda, you'll see that there's a way where you can discuss with others. And what I'd like you to do is post your understanding of how achievement targets relate to our assessment of the learning. And we'll continue talking about this throughout the rest of the course. So good luck with the different assignments for the week, and I hope that you have a great week, and I will see you next week.